All right, so again, we're going over the capstone now, which is lesson 7. I'm not going to read this. You can read all that stuff yourself, okay? But the author does say on the very bottom of the page, to create this application, we'll use the following steps. Initialize a package.json. So you need an npm init. I wouldn't use the -y for this. All right, so put it in there, you know, and really, you don't have to do this, but this is what, in fact, I'd like you to do this, okay? I'd like you to go up, remember how you get to GitHub and you make a new repository? Remember that? All right. I'd like you, after you do all that stuff, to make a folder, and I don't know what they tell you to call it, confetti cuisine or whatever. Go into that folder and do a git init and take everything you're doing, all right? And the reason for that is now if you do that, you'll be able to go back with each lesson and you'll be able to add onto it in each lesson. And I will tell you, there are people who are getting jobs in this field, and I'm not just saying this. There are people getting jobs in this field that they're doing a lot of stuff that's out of books, but it's really well documented, and they've got it in their GitHub repository so potential employers can look for it. That's the reason that I want you to do this stuff. So going on to page 74, create the application logic and main, create 3 views. Each should have a clickable image that can be served independently. Okay. Add custom assets, build the application's router, handle errors, and run the app. Okay. It might sound hard, but it's pretty much what we just did in the last chapter. Now, you were given errors, you can do that. All right, so initializing the application, as the author says here. Again, I'm on page 74, section 7.1. As they say, use npm to create the package.json. Use main.js as your starting point. Change the description as shown and add your name. So when you get done, yours should pretty much look like what you see on the bottom of page 74 and the top of page 75. So this assumes that you're going to name your folder confetti_cuisine. Does that make sense? All right. So 7.2, still following along? Okay. Understanding the application directory structure. So that says underneath main, so underneath confetti cuisine, you have 2 files that you're creating. You're creating main.js, you're creating package or router.js. Okay, you're creating those 2. Then you will create a public folder. Under that public folder, you'll create a CSS folder. All right, under that CSS folder, you'll add 2 files. You will personally be creating confetti_cuisine.css. All right, the bootstrap.css, go out to get bootstrap, or even just type in cdn for bootstrap.min.css. Okay, and just grab that. All right, the images, again, you have access now to those images. The product, the graph, the cat, and people. If you don't like their images and you want to use some of your own, I could care less. As long as it works and it still looks good. You will have a JS folder, and it'll have a file called confetticuisine.js. That will be for client-side JavaScript that you might create. I believe in this particular capstone, I don't think you do anything with confetticuisine.js. The package lock.json is going to be created for you automatically. The package.json is going to be created for you automatically. I think you create the content types.js and the utils.js, but they give you all the code. Then you'll have a views folder. Under that views folder, if you take a look up on page, move up to page 76, you'll put in those 5 files. All right. Let's see. 7.3, creating main.js and router.js. The main reason I want you to go through this is I want you to make sure you can structure this the way that they show it. All right. So the code for the main.js files, This is a little bit different. It's very short. You see this on the bottom of page 76? All right. This says our router information is going to be in a file in our folder, in the same folder we're in that's called router.js. Our content type information is going to be in a folder in the same area that we're in that's called content types.js. And our utilities will be in a thing called utils. All right, just so you know, the content types are basically going to say, is this an HTML file? Is this a JSON file? Is this a JavaScript file? Is this, it's going to tell the file type. The router for the routes, the utils for any utility routines that we want to be able to create as we go through here. All right. So look at, I'm on page 77, hope you are. This is the code you're going to put into your content types.js file. You will create this file. Not a long file, maybe 15, 20 lines. But it says if it's an HTML file, it's got to hold HTML content. If it's a text file, plain content. JS file, text.js, JPEG, etc., PNG, etc., and CSS. Do all those make sense? This is a thing for every type of asset you may have in that public folder. You may have straight text. You may have HTML, which isn't going to go in your public folder. It's going to go in your views folder. You may have JS, which is going to be in the JS file that's in your public folder. You may have JPEG or PNGs, and if you knew that you were going to have WebPs or you knew you were going to have GIFs, you would add those as well. Does that make sense? All right, and then your CSS. Okay, bottom of the page and going on to the next page, the author says, next I set up a function that I will use to read the contents in a new utility file. What the author is attempting to do here, you're smart enough, I know you understand this, is he's attempting to modularize this stuff. So rather than putting all of his code in main, he's parsing his code out into other routines and just referring to those routines inside of main. All right? Because your main file should have just your application logic in it, not what kind of file you're looking at, etc.
So everything that he's calling in the main.js in the listing 7.3 on here,
yeah,
all that stuff is calling all those files that you're creating.
It's making all that stuff that we have exported in there, it's making it available in main.js.
Okay.
All right. So what are we doing in here? Well, notice it looks familiar in the const fs equals require the HTTP status. Again, you're going to have to do your npm I, etc. The content types, you're bringing it in. Then what are we doing after that? All right, we are exporting, so this is a get file. It says attempt to read a file. Remember, get means give me existing information. As of right now, when we read a get, if we had, let's just say we had multiple records. So this is a cooking site. Let's say we registered 10 people. All right. Well, as of right now, if we had registered 10 people, we did a get, we'd get all 10 back. Eventually, what we want to do is we want to do a get, but we want to pass it an ID. All right. If you remember that from the database stuff. So if there's 10 of us and I'm person 1 and you're 2 and I ask for 2, it gives me just your information back. And that's especially important when you do updates and when you do deletes. Because if we didn't do that, we'd be updating everybody or we'd be deleting everybody. We don't want to, of course, we don't want to do that. All right. So the get file attempts to read the file. If there's an error, it sends server error. All right. And it says there was an error serving content. Otherwise, it gives it to you. Does that make sense? All right. Last, it says add the code, and this is the router. So again, the code that's in 7.6, which is on the bottom of page 78 and a little bit on the top of page 79, this is doing all of our routes. So you'll notice, now I want to make sure you get this. You notice how it says const HTTP status right there at the top? Mm-hmm. You only have to do that install once per project. Then it's available to every file in the project. All right? I don't want you to do, npm I http -codes -s 3 or 4 times. That makes no sense.
So if I just do it,
if you do it once, you can actually, if you want to, you can do that. Right after you do your npm init, you could do it then if you wanted to. That would be totally fine. All right, so notice now the router requires our content types, so it knows what kind of file it is, and our utilities, because that's where we're reading the file in. All right, other than that, it's almost the exact same thing we just did. Do you notice that? You see how, don't go and retype tons of your code, Keegan, okay? If you've got it already, go back and take a look, then copy it in, especially if you got it and you know it worked. All right. That's not cheating. You're using your code over again. That's a good thing to do. All right. I'm up to page 79, creating views. Is that where you are? Section 7.4. The views are client-facing and could make or break the user experience. In other words, the views are what the outside world sees. All right. You're doing all the stuff behind the scenes. I mean, it's kind of like, you're the mechanic, so to speak, and somebody's going to go out and drive the car. So no matter how well you tune it up, they don't give a damn. They just care if it doesn't work, type of an idea. All right. So the author says they'll use a similar template for each page to reduce the complexity. The top of each page should have some HTML. So in other words, the top should look like that on every page. All right. This is one advantage that we're going to have once we get into using these HTML helpers that you don't have in regular HTML. In other words, as of right now, you've got to write this stuff on the top, the confetti cuisine and the 3 buttons. You've got to write that for every single file. One for your home page, one for your courses page, one for your contact page. When we get in, we start using what's called like embedded JS, embedded JavaScript. We're going to write it once and just tell it to use it 3 times. All right. So right now it doesn't look like much. That's the home page. And if you use their picture, that's what you're going to get. If you don't want to use their picture, if you don't like the way it looks, get a food picture or get a picture of a chef or something else. If you want it, if you don't like their color scheme, use your color scheme. I want this to kind of reflect you. You know what I'm saying? Either next week or the following week, probably in 2 weeks, we're going to create an application, that stock ticker that I told you about. And we're going to get to a certain point. I'm going to give you, not to be funny, the world's almost most butt-ugly interface. But then I'm going to say, okay, Keegan, you got this? Yeah. Does it work? Yeah. Good. Now make it yours. All right? So, for the home page, we're going to create a new view. All a view is it's an HTML file. In this case, it's an HTML file that's in the views folder. Make sure you name the folders the way they tell you to name them here, because that's the way the framework looks for things. All right, it expects it to be named, not so much index.html, but in a folder named views or in a folder named public, etc. All right, and add the content specific to the index page. Because I'm using Bootstrap, I need to link that file. So that's that bootstrap.css, okay? And yeah, put that in your head, yeah. Well, yours probably won't look just like that because, let's see, yours will probably be in CSS/bootstrap.css. You'll know real fast, right? Because if you got a Bootstrap, if you got any kind of CSS file and you're not linking to it correctly, it won't show. All right. Next, we create another HTML file that shows off a list of the courses. Says this form submits contact information via post. So this is, it's a little different. Why? Because it's a list of cooking classes. They want to let you sign up for classes. All right. So this is a very simple form that they want you to create. How simple is it? If you're not there, are you on page 80? Do you see where it says reach out to us and underneath it? The whole form is that text box and the button. Okay. If you want, you can add their image, I think that comes with it, okay, the one that's shown on the left, or not an image at all, or your own image, okay? So it says my site's contact page is going to look like this. Each page links to the others through the navigation bar. Make sure that that works, so you should be able to peruse from page to page. Then, next we add the assets, starting on the bottom of page 80, and, what does it say in there? It says, for this application, I've created some custom styles to be used by each of the views. Any color, dimension, or placement changes, that goes into your file. That's the one you make yours. The confetti cuisine or confetti underscore cuisine.css. Okay? These things that you put in public like this, don't preface them with public slash. The system already knows they're in public. Okay? Sometimes though, and you might get stuck on this, you're like, you look and you go, hey, this isn't working and everything I've got is the way it is in the book. When you give it paths when you're going to stuff, a lot of times you have to say dot slash, which means go from where I currently am, slash. Okay, just so you know that. And I can tell you that, but you're still going to get hung with it because I still do. All right, 7.6, creating routes. It says the last piece of the puzzle is an important one. The routes of my application will determine which URLs are accessible to the client and which files I'll serve. It says I specifically created the router.js to handle my routes, but I still need to register them. Registering means passing a URL and a callback back to myrouter.get or myrouter.post. So it needs to handle it. I mean, imagine this. Imagine that there was you and Angie in here, okay? And let's say that you are a Node expert and she is a CSS expert. Well, I got a CSS problem. So I know that, I've got to route it to her. I've got a Node problem. I've got to route it to you. That's exactly what they're saying in here. So to register a route, it says we need to state the following, whether it's a get or a post, the path, the name of the file to return, some kind of a status code. Again, the 200s typically mean okay, 300s kind of 400s mean not found typically, 500 means server error. Those, as a user, there's nothing you can do about 500 errors. 400 errors, you might have typed in a wrong file name or had a wrong path or something else, or the file maybe just didn't exist. So 7.8, it's just got all the code in there and going on from 81 to page 82. It's pretty big. All right, then at the bottom, we're starting the server. And that's it. Now, again, I'm not saying to you, hey, did that make 100% sense? It hopefully will make some sense when you start working on it. Does that make sense? But right now, if you told me this totally makes 100% sense, I would say either you're fooling yourself and me, all right, or, boy, you're a hell of a lot brighter than I am. And I'm not even saying you're not brighter than I am. But I don't know how anybody can just start on this stuff and boom, it just makes sense. All right. So again, before we go on to part 2, which we will do next week, easier web development with Express.js. I'm hoping to get this done this weekend where I'm setting up a project. It's not going to be much, but it's something that we do totally on our own without Express. When we get into Express next week, you'll be like, well, this is a lot easier than the way we were doing, because it is. But there are still projects out there that don't use Express. So you've got to know how to handle those too, and that's why the first capstone looks like it does. Does that all make sense? Mm-hmm. Questions? I know that was a lot to throw at you in a little bit of time. I mean, it was, 19 minutes. But I just want to make sure that you at least think you've got a pretty good understanding of what's going on. Yeah. So start on it. If you have questions, feel free to ask. All right. Much of the stuff that you're going to be doing in here is going to be keying in what's already in the book.